The GRX 12-speed mechanical gravel group set. I spotted this back in June at Unbound Gravel, and as of today, it is officially out in 3 configurations. There are 2 1x setups. There's a 1x with a 1045 cassette, 1 tooth bigger than SRAM's offering. There is a 1x group with a 1051 cassette, which slots in between SRAM's 1050 and 1052 Eagle cassettes. And then there is a third option with a 2x, similar to what Shimano GRX has had in the past, and then 2 cassette options in 1134 and 1136, notably not going down to the 10 there. There's a lot to love here with this new stuff, and there's a few things that bug me. All come with Shimano's clutch, the Shadow rear derailleur that's been around since 2011 when Shimano brought that out in mountain bike. It came to drop bar bikes in 2018 with Ultegra RX, which preceded GRX, the world's first dedicated gravel group set. Of course, SRAM has followed up recently with the Explorer group, and Campagnolo now has Ekar, a 13-speed group. 12-speed is a first for Shimano GRX, pulling at level with SRAM on Explorer, both of which are still 1 cog behind Campy's Ekar. In addition to the extra cog and the new cassette options, there's refined lever shaping. Shimano reworked the levers a bit to work with the flared bars that are increasingly popular on gravel bikes. New rotors and a new caliper, which gets that same 10% increase in spacing as we've seen on Shimano's 12-speed road groups. There are also a few things not present here. There's no power meter yet on GRX. There is no Di2 12-speed option, although 11-speed is continuing in Di2, and Shimano will allow that 12-speed Di2 in GRX is coming, just won't say when. And lastly, there are no big rings, both in the single ring option, which maxes out at a 42, and on the 2x, where a 48 is the biggest you can get. I spent a day in Bend riding the new group with some folks from Shimano and others from the media. Now I've got this group in here to build up on a test bike to ride. In this video, I want to tell you about what's new with the group, how it compares to the likes of Shimano and SRAM in terms of cost and weight and functionality, and then also just share my ride impressions from that one smoky day in Oregon. Please take a second to subscribe, that helps me out. And now sit back and enjoy the 12-speed ride with GRX.
Welcome fans to the ride with Ben Delaney.
Oh, good eye, mate.
First, a quick history on GRX and gravel-specific groups. If you want to jump ahead to different sections, I've laid those out in the table of contents below. GRX came out 2019, following up on that Ultegra RX rear clutch derailleur that I first saw at the Classics in Belgium in 2018 under Trek Segafredo. I got a chance to ride that RX derailleur and did a ride along with the Segafredo team, including a certain Keo Reinen, who's now a gravel guy, going up many of the Tour of Flanders climbs, including the Muur-Kapelmuur. So that was my first experience riding a drop bar bike with the now ubiquitous for Shimano Shadow clutch, which still has the on-off. That's on, that's off, and it's tension adjustable. A taut chain is but a part of what makes a gravel group a gravel group. Prior to this coming out, I had a lot of dirty socks on the ankles as chains would get slapped around quite a bit. So that is a key piece, but again, not the only piece. A wider chain line or wider stance on the crank is also part of what determines a gravel group. 45 millimeters is your road spacing and 47.5 is your GRX spacing. This allows for a wider tire and still having chain clearance or front derailleur clearance. Lower gearing is another piece of the gravel group pie. Some of that is determined by how big you go at the cassette, and some of that's how small you go at the chain ring. And then lastly, at least for Shimano, you've got a differentiated lever shape. SRAM levers are the same road to gravel. Campagnolo has slightly different levers for its Ekar group, and then GRX has noticeably different levers for the GRX group. And the shape here is, I don't want to say polarizing, but some people love it, some people not so much. It's textured for grip. And then again, what's new this year is, a slight curvature in the lever to better accommodate and better work with flared bars. Another key difference in the GRX lever compared to Shimano's road levers is that the pivot point is up a bit higher to make the braking position from the tops powerful and not just from the drop. So a subtle thing, but one that makes a difference. And then Shimano also, has a fishing division, and it's got a no slip or a less slip surface treatment to the levers. So that's a bit of history about gravel groups in general. Now Shimano came out of the gate with 3 tiers, 800, 600, and 400, which is basically the further you go down, the heavier it gets and the cheaper it gets. SRAM has 4: Red, Force, Rival, Apex, all distinct groups, same deal. The further down the tree you go, the higher the weight goes and the lower the price goes. SRAM also has more offerings than Shimano in terms of pieces in that group. For instance, SRAM now has, thanks to RockShox being part of the family, a gravel-specific suspension fork. They also have a dropper post actuated electronically with the axis shifters. Shimano has levers that work with a mechanical dropper post, but does not itself produce a dropper post. So now let's talk about what's new here and continuing with Shimano GRX. 800 is the top end stuff. You've also got some new 600 pieces, which reduce the cost, 20 to 25% and ramp up the weight a bit. Also with 600, you've got some lower gear options. On the 1x side, you've got a 40T and a 38T ring compared to the 40 and 42 on the 800 side. And then on the 2x, you can get a 4630. Shimano 11-speed GRX is still out there, still being supported. 11-speed Di2 is the only Di2 GRX, so that is still out there and being supported. Part of why I think Shimano is being cautious with releasing a fewer number of pieces is that the industry is still full of bikes out there. Bike shops are full, suppliers are full. While in COVID, demand was like this and supply was like this, we've now seen it do the reverse and we've got a glut of bikes. So I think Shimano is operating like a sensible business. Not the most fun thing to talk about product-wise, but I think that's part of what is driving the focus on certain parts as opposed to just blowing out all the different possible configurations. Something that's new and the same, cranks. In that the crank arm is the same design as 11-speed, but you've got new rings. And your options are, again, relatively limited here. You've got a 40 or a 40-tooth single ring option here, and you've got 3 crank length options, 170, 172.5, and then 175. One positive thing about the crank continuing on is you can use your trusty Stages left arm for power. Another new things, wheels, not officially branded GRX, but certainly gravel wheels, and they've got a 25 mil internal. These guys, in true Shimano engineering alphanumeric naming convention, are called the WH-RX880C32s. 32 millimeter height, 25 millimeter internal, in micro spline for 1x, and then a new free hub body, similar, which is basically the 12-speed road option. 1x goes with micro spline, and thereby this 12-speed 1x can go with the existing 11-speed wheels. And then the 2x requires the new Shimano 12-speed free hub. Again, you've got the new lever shape, better suited for flared bars. New rotors with the aluminum carrier, helps with heat dissipation. 10% increase in the pad spacing on the new rotors. I could say from riding the new road stuff, this is definitely noticeable. Not in the braking power, but in what happens after long descents when you're on the brake for a long time. It's much less likely to get that squealing and chirping you get, or at least I get as a heavy rider doing longer descents. So I think that's a positive thing for this. To repeat your 3 main configuration options, 2 1x, 1045, 1051, and then a 2x with 1134 and 1136 cassettes. So how does this new group compare to Campagnolo Ekar and SRAM Explorer? Compared to SRAM, it's considerably more limited. So let's start with Campy Ekar. Ekar, like this 12-speed group, is mechanical only. It is also 1x only. So Shimano, you've got a 2x and 2 1x options here. With Campy though, you've got a wider breadth of chain rings to choose from. You've got from 38 up to 44. And then you've got a few cassette options, 936 and 942, and then a 1044. So you've got a wider, certainly a wider front ring selection, and then, you know, a bigger top end gear ultimately. Campy's no electronic option, no power meter option. SRAM, by comparison, has all the things. You've got 2x, you've got 1x, you've got not just 1 power meter, but now 2 power meter options that you can plug into all the different groups. For single rings, you've got from 38 up to a 46, and we've even seen the likes of a certain Keegan Swinson running a 52 with his Eagle group. Like at Steamboat Gravel, for instance, he ran that 52 on the front and then a 1052 cassette on the back. Another noticeable difference between Shimano and SRAM, mechanical and electronic. No electronic 12-speed yet from Shimano. SRAM has electronic 12-speed in all 4 tiers, Red, Force, Rival, and Axis, and has some mechanical options in the lower axis in both the smaller Explorer, which is the 1044, and then the larger Eagle, which is comparable to this size here. So a lot more options from SRAM, not just in terms of gearing configurations, but in terms of electronic or mechanical options. So which group is best? Are more options better? Let me tell you about some things I love and some things that bug me. Things I love: Shimano's reliability and dependability. A pinnacle example of this, I think, are Shimano pedals, which I've got on all the test bikes here and I've used for years and years. Never have to think about them, almost never have to do any maintenance on them. They just work and work. And periodically, every year, every few years, Shimano will make some small tweaks and upgrades. It's not super flashy, but the things just work and work really well. That might not be the sexiest video topic, but reliability and dependability as a rider, for me, is high up there on the priority list. And based on my past experience with Shimano groups, I would expect a similar level of quality from this. Yeah, that's just speculation. I've spent all of one ride on this thing so far. But for instance, my favorite gravel bike recently, as you may have seen from my top 5 list, was a Giant Revolt with Shimano GRX 11-speed Di2. Like the bike, the group isn't necessarily the flashiest, but I just love the functionality and the feel and the durability and the reliability of that group. So that's one of the things among, like I said, the pedals I've been using for years, the groups I've been using for years, that gives me a high level of confidence with this new group. Similarly, I love the updated caliper design. Not a huge deal, but a small improvement that makes a noticeable, audible difference. As I mentioned in the top of the video, love the clutch. I'm a big fan of the functionality. I like being able to switch it on and off to get your wheel off, and I like the fact that you can tune it as needed. Also with this guy, you can switch out the cage. If you decide you want to go from a big cassette to a small cassette or vice versa, you can replace just the cage and not replace the whole derailleur. The hood shape, I don't really love, I don't really hate it. I think it's fine. The textured surface doesn't bug me. One thing I've appreciated recently about electronic designs is how much more room you get for your fingers behind the lever. This is pretty darn close, I have to say. I mean, this is just the brake lever with no shifter. This is close, but not quite as roomy as the Di2. The Di2 has got a bit longer reach to it, and also you just don't have the mechanical bits there. So, I mean, tiny little things, but things I notice. So far, in my one entire ride on them, and the slight angle to the hoods feels good. I like Shimano's shift performance. You know, one thing we knucklehead editors will do somewhat obnoxiously at launches for groups is shift terribly, like like that. It'll be like standing on the pedals, trying to ride as hard as you can and shift at times when you probably shouldn't shift, just to see how the system operates. And Shimano is pretty hard to trick. It will shift up and down smoothly under full power, no problems there. Here's what bugs me about this group: the lack of ring choices. You've got a 40 or a 42. And especially here in Colorado, coming down, not even steep hills, but just coming down hills, you can spin out a 42 teeth ring pretty quickly. So I get that, you know, Shimano is paying attention to the meat of the market, and probably for most riders in most areas, that's fine. But again, since all its competitors have a much broader selection of rings, I just feel like, as Barack Obama famously said, come on, man, give us some more ring choices. Luckily, just like you've got a Stages choice for a power meter, you've got a wolf tooth choice for more rings that are Shimano 12-speed compatible. Talked to those folks just a couple days ago and ordered a 44 tooth ring that is Shimano 12-speed compatible. Would be a lot cooler if we could just get it straight from Shimano as part of the group. Similarly, it would be a lot cooler. I know I love my trusty Stages meters, but SRAM has 2-meter options now built into the system. Come on, Shimano, help us out here. And lastly, no Di2. I get Shimano is being responsible and looking at the global market and seeing what its, you know, bike brand partners have in terms of stock, which is a lot. But as an overgrown kid just eager for the latest toys, I want that 12-speed Di2, Shimano. Okay, now some ride impressions and some personal stories. It was great to ride with some Shimano folks like Yuta Mizutani from Japan, Dave Lawrence from California, and Kristen Ligon, who just won Unbound XL this year. Another Ligon at Shimano is Nick Ligon, the man who quite literally wrote the book on gravel cycling. Nick and I worked at Velonews once upon a time, and Nick was the guy that got me into gravel cycling in a way. He was doing Unbound back when it was still DK and would come back telling stories of how good it was, and I would just look at him like, Nick, you're a crazy person. That sounds terrible. And now I've gone from making fun of gravel and scoffing at the lemonade to not just drinking lemonade, but pouring it for other people. So that to say, not that Nick or Kristen run Shimano, but they are some of the folks who are very much involved in gravel cycling and are playing a part in the pieces. It's also good to ride with other editors so we can swap notes as we're rolling along about what we like or don't like, or impressions or misimpressions. First impressions riding in Oregon was that the stuff just works. You know, again, that's my positive bias about Shimano leading into this, is that it's just solid, reliable componentry. Shifting under load, no problem. Hard braking in dust, no problem. I appreciated that the wheels were relatively quiet when riding through the woods. You know, by the wheels I mean the free hub in particular. While coasting, there's a bit of noise, but it's, you know, not a screeching, squawking hub. The bike I was on was set up with the 1045. That feels quite similar to the 1044s that I've been running quite a bit on SRAM bikes the last couple years, with a 42 tooth cog. So the steps between gears feel nice. Shifting feels good. Shimano gave all the editors in attendance the choice of the 3 different configurations to take home to build up into long-term test bikes. I asked for the bigger 1x precisely because this is new and I haven't really spent a lot of time on the larger 1x setup. You know, I've got a 1052 here on a Giant Revolt X test bike, so I have a little experience with the SRAM variant of this. Obviously I don't have any experience with this Shimano version. Were it to be my money that I was buying something, I would go for the 2x because that's, you know, tried and true. I like the total range and I like the small steps in between. This is new for me, so I want to spend some time checking out and to see if the jumps between the cogs are annoying or it's something that I can live with. Obviously, it looks big here going on the lower, biggest cogs, but even down on the small end, you're looking at, you know, 2-tooth increments, which compared to a smaller cassette, once you get down here, you're usually in a, you know, single tooth increment. So I'm going to give this a crack, ride this for a few months, and report back on my feelings for this wider 1x. As I alluded to, I'm going to make 2 changes to this group right out of the gate before I even ride the thing. Putting on a wolf tooth ring for a 44 to have a bit bigger gear, and then putting on a Stages left side crank so I have power. I won't bore you with numbers on prices and weights of each and every component, but I'll put that information down below if you want to check that out. Again, initial impressions is that you've got fewer options here than with SRAM, but at first blush, it seems to be good old, dependable, reliable Shimano quality. And in general, I feel like this is going to be a great group. And I wish you just had a few more options, like ring size, like some power, and an electronic option, which is coming at some unannounced point in the future. In the meantime, I will be riding this and we'll report back after a few months with a full review. I thank you for watching. I thank you for subscribing, and whatever gearing preference you have for gravel, I hope you get out there and enjoy the ride. Excuse me while I mess with my camera and crash us both. With Eckhar's wider breadth. Oh, a duck. Another noticeable difference between Shimano and SRAM. Shimano's leaning hard on mechanical with them out.